Never know what we're going to get into. All the rock news, all the interviews. Actually had a bandmate of this next guest on with us yesterday when Mike Portnoy checked in along with John Petrucci, and we talked a little bit about the Winery Dogs, which is the band, one of the bands that Mike Portnoy shares with Billy Sheehan, and now we speak with Billy Sheehan live on the show today. Billy, how are you, man?
Eddie? I'm good.
Good to talk to you.
I haven't seen you for so long.
It's been a bit. It's been a minute. Yeah, how's things going, man?
Super great. Super great.
How you enjoying Tennessee? You relocated after decades in L.A. to the Nashville area. How's that been for you?
We love it. It's the weather is great. Winters are mild. People are really friendly. We got a great place and a great spot with raccoons and chipmunks and deer and all kinds of wildlife. And there's no state tax. So that helps too.
Yeah, no doubt. That's always a nice thing. That's, I think, part of the reason why so much of Los Angeles and the musician community has moved to either Nashville or where I am in Vegas now part time, or Texas or other areas. It's nice to get a little break from that stuff.
Yeah, it gets expensive, that's for sure. I contributed to the state of California for 32 years. You're welcome. And now we move on.
Well, it's interesting what you have that you're here predominantly to talk about today, because it's really a return to your roots, and that is your first band, and certainly the first time I heard of you as a musician and a player with a band called Talas that was very popular in upstate New York, and you recently put out a new, with quotes around it, album from Talas called 1985. So, Billy, this being a national show, I know Talas was tremendously popular in upstate New York, but for the national audience, give everybody the overview of Talas and its history, if you don't mind.
Well, great. Yeah, we started actually in the early 70s, 71, 72. We're playing in bars, being a copy band. Eventually, we snuck a few originals in there. There's been about 8 incarnations of the band as far as different members coming and going and what have you. Then in 79, actually, we put out an album of originals, or mostly originals. And then by 1980 came along, and by some freak set of circumstances, we ended up opening for Van Halen. And we went around to a lot of America, West Coast, in the South, and everywhere. So we got the name around a little bit then. Then that version of Talas changed again, and we got the version that is on this newer record. And one of the first calls we got is that lineup was from the William Morris Agency to put us on tour with Yngwie. So summer of '85, we went out on tour with Yngwie, and we had a riot. I think it was Yngwie's first national tour, certainly his first solo tour. And we had a blast. Unfortunately, that tour, at the very beginning of it, we started in L.A., and I had a meeting with Dave Roth, and he invited me to come join him and start a band. So that was 1985, how it kind of ended. So the album is kind of a symbol of everything that led up to that. What an amazing time we had in 1985, and what might have happened if we would have continued on and recorded the songs that are on this new record as we would have back in that day. So here we are now, and I texted you last night, as you know, having Talas finally actually be on the Billboard charts. Who'd have thunk it? We never imagined we would ever get there, but 30, 40 years later, better late than never.
Yeah, well, congratulations. I mean, that's a really cool thing to see. Now, there's a lot there in what you said. I want to go back to what you said in 1980, Talas being, I believe, an unsigned band for the most part at that time. How do you end up being on a national tour opening for Van Halen, who around 1980 probably would have been 3 records in, Women and Children around that point? How do you land something like that without having a hit or a record deal or a national profile?
Great question. We had a local manager in Buffalo, did our day-to-day stuff, and then the local promoters in Buffalo were big in the music biz. They brought in all the big acts, Van Halen or The Who or Emerson, Lake and Palmer or whatever, into Buffalo, into Rich Stadium or other giant venues. So by default, because we were kind of the biggest band around town, they became our managers, so to speak. So they actually sent a cassette of ours down to Premier Talent booking agency who they dealt with so much because of the big bands they booked. And unknown to us, Barbara sent it to Van Halen. They liked it and said, okay, put them on. Now, the interesting side note of that is that was the manager that did that. That was Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, wow. Harvey Weinstein managed Talas?
Yes.
Wow. Man, there's some interesting history there, huh? I mean, wow. So what was it like for you and Talas to be on tour with Van Halen in 1980?
A dream come true. We all loved that band to start with. I mean, we were head over heels about them from the very first time we heard them. And getting that tour, and I remember the first night on tour, we were in our dressing room. It was kind of an L-shaped room where I could see the door and no one else in the room could. And I was sitting there, the door opened up, and we didn't know any of the guys in the band. We knew them as fans, of course. In walks Ed Van Halen, and the first thing he says is, "Which one of you guys is Billy Sheehan?" And I said, "Me, that's me." And I don't know how he knew of me. It might have been from Denny Carmassi, because I had worked with Denny briefly when we did the pre-production on Michael Schenker's first record in London. I went over there for that because we had opened for UFO at one point, and they'd seen me play, and Michael called me for that. So it might be where he knew it from. But they were great to us on that tour. They were so nice. They let us do encores, and we became friends. So every time they came on tour after that, we knew the crew guys, so I could always go and say hi, and they get me back to say hello to the band. And an amazing turn of events that I'm forever grateful for.
Now, you mentioned 1985, Talas opening for Yngwie Malmsteen, and I was at that show that you played at the Beacon Theater in New York. Did I hear it right that David Lee Roth was actually at that show, and that's kind of like where he approached you about joining his band?
Yeah, he was at the show, but we had already established that at the LA show at the Palladium. I had a meeting with him the day before that show. I had a day off when we came into LA, and so the whole tour. The tough part about it was I love these guys in Talas so much. We had a wonderful time together, but the whole tour I couldn't say anything. I was kind of sworn to secrecy. So the whole time that we're doing these shows with Yngwie having a ride in the back of my mind of going, man, we're going to have a little meeting at the end of this tour where I explain what's going on. And it was bittersweet for sure. I mean, you'd love to make it in your own band with your own thing and your own songs, but we're still, as you know, getting a record deal, because we did get a record deal right at the end there with Danny Goldberg, who had Gold Mountain Records. He ended up, I think he was Nirvana's manager also later on. Mm-hmm. So we had that. But as you know, having a record deal is no guarantee anything is going to happen. We didn't know if we'd record a record and nothing would happen. And I was just getting kind of antsy for some degree of success in my life. And when Dave came along, I said, I'll take it.
So the record that has just come out, 1985 from Talas, talk a little bit about making this record, the idea to, you clearly felt like you had some unfinished business with the guys. I don't know how long it had been since you played with them until, I don't know if you have recently or not, but what's interesting about what you've done with this record is when you came together to make a new Talas record, you didn't go in and say, let's write all new songs. You actually archived material you wrote back in 1985 that never came out, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we had two choices. We could take that material that we played live a million times back in the day and like jazz it up and spice it up and modernize it and bring it up to date. Or we could get in the time machine, go back to 1985 and do it like we did it then. So we chose the latter. And I'm glad we did. It was kind of in our DNA a little bit, having played it live so much. But we got together initially, I think in 2019. I had done a reunion with the earlier version of Talas, but those guys were kind of unavailable or not into it anymore. So Phil Naro, the singer, and Mark Miller approached me to maybe we should do a reunion with us. And I said, yeah, okay. So we did a Barnard, New York, right outside of Rochester, had a charity show. So we played for free, and thousands of people showed up. We had a riot, and the next obvious step was, hey, let's do some more shows. So we played the Iridium down in New York. We did shows in Rochester, Albany, Buffalo, a couple other ones. And then we thought, of course, the next step, let's record it. And so we got together in drummer Mark Miller's house that he built, on the drum kit that he built, all together in a room, just like the old days, and laid down the tracks. We did the vocals with Phil in Toronto, me in Nashville. With some special audio software, I was able to do the vocal production remotely with Zoom or FaceTime as our talkback. And we got it done. And there you have it.
Well, it's really like, I'm so glad that you didn't try to modernize it and you went with what 85 sounded like, because to me, it still sounds very fresh. It still sounds very current. It still sounds very live. And it's just great, straight up hard rock. And really some great songs here. I was listening to the record earlier. So there is some tragedy associated with this, though, because your singer, who sings fantastically on the record, Phil Naro, when you began working with him on recording this, I guess a year or two ago, you had learned that he was sick, correct?
Yeah, we knew he had a problem, but it had gone into remission. And we didn't know pretty much until the end that things were looking difficult. The end of the recording process. As a matter of fact, Phil was going up to that mic, and I saw him on my little video screen in Toronto with our Toronto engineer, Russ McKay, and singing his heart out and just killing it. But I did notice that it was a little bit scatterbrained. Like he'd sing a wrong lyric, and I'd say, no, Phil, this is what it is. Okay, he'd sing it wrong again. And I'd say, Phil, cross out whatever you have there and write in the right lyric. And eventually he'd get it. But it struck me as a little funny, and unknown to us, unfortunately, his cancer had come out of remission, and it was not looking good. So as much as I have nothing but the most amazing respect and admiration for Phil Naro, it is even more so now knowing that he walked up to that mic, knowing he was in big trouble, and he delivered as the best I've heard him sing. He just nailed it, and it says so much about the character of this gentleman and his talent and his just relentless push forward in spite of the situation. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is, and sadly, before the record was released, he passed away. So he's not with you anymore to be able to experience the great reaction and reception to this record. But what a phenomenal final statement from him in terms of his performance and the quality of the record and the quality of the performance. And I know that on the record you actually did a track that's a bass solo that's a tribute to him, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. On Synchretitan of that album, I had NV43345, which is upside down. It looks like Sheehan. Then on the live album, I did something like that too. So on this one, if you turn down the numbers and letters, if you turn them upside down, you'll see that it says For Phil. And I just wanted to give a farewell to really just a wonderful guy. I mean, we've all heard of lead singer's disease, but Phil Naro was the one guy that had not a trace of it. He's the sweetest, easiest going, affable, friendly, wonderful. Fans loved him, and what a great performer. A terrible loss, and we're glad now that people are taking to this record in such a positive way, because when we first had the record named, and the idea of it, 1985, was a tribute to the spirit of that time, and I was on Sunset Boulevard. People were six deep. It was like a Mardi Gras every night, rock bands and players and clubs. And back on the East Coast too, New York, New Jersey, it was jumping all the time. So that was our original thought, what that record was going to commemorate. And then, of course, the turn of circumstances, we're looking at it now more as a tribute to a wonderful man and a supreme talent.
Billy, you mentioned there were a lot of different versions of Talas. The fact that this record has done well and the response has been good to it so far, but obviously against the backdrop of the tragedy of Phil passing away. Does that prevent you from potentially doing more with Talas, or is there another move here with maybe a different variation on the lineup or another singer that could come in and pick up the ball and run with it from here, or do you even have a desire to do that?
Well, I do have a desire, but it has to be tempered with some sensitivity here. We would like to initially maybe just do a night in tribute to Phil and see how we feel. We know a singer or two that could come up. Phil's son is also, he sang on the record. His son James, he sang the harmonies on Crystal Clear and a few others, and on Black and Blue, the only new song on the record. So we maybe, if he'd be into doing it, we'd invite him up for a couple of songs to sing. So we're not sure. I'd love to play more. Playing with Mark Miller is a dream. He's just an amazing drummer. And the guitarist we use, Kiri. We also did have Mitch Perry on the record for the two songs he contributed to, Crystal Clear and On the Take. He did a great job. It was wonderful to have him involved again. But we'll see. The door is open, but we do want to keep in mind that it's a sensitive situation, and I'm not into exploiting anything during situations like this. Unfortunately, we had a similar situation in Mr. Big, the loss of Pat Torpey. We did go out and finish our commitments with Matt Starr on drums, who did an amazing job and is a dear friend, but it's not the same, without the guy. And so since then, we have done nothing. We may do something in the future at some point or other. I'd love to see Paul and Eric again. We'll see. But it's a similar situation. It's kind of tough to get back up there, missing one of the guys.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What the status of Mr. Big was. Obviously, we know you did initially when you went out and toured. When Pat was still alive. Actually, Pat and Matt were out there for a bit, and then I know that Matt was doing the bulk of the drumming, and I just wasn't sure where it was left with Mr. Big. Eric actually is out now opening for Michael Schenker, doing his own thing. So I know he's out there and been quite active as far as playing and stuff. But there's some. You think there's some opportunity to do, or some interest to do something with Mr. Big again at some point?
I believe so. Yeah, I would love to. I mean, and I get email every day from fans that are just dying to see us play again, and that's very touching. And of course, we won't do it unless there's certainly a very big point of attention put on the life and legacy of Pat. That's important to us as well. That because there was four of us, and he was one for the whole adventure we had. So, of course, it's going to be in tribute to him for sure. We'll make sure to acknowledge him in every way we can if we do something, that's for sure.
And just hitting you on a few other things from your career, I had Steve Vai on with me a week or so ago, and we were talking about all kinds of stuff, and we got on to talking about David Lee Roth, as we often do, and I was asking Steve, it seems like Dave has this desire in and out to kind of do rock music again, and now he's put out some re-records of Van Halen songs, and seems like there's times where he's going to pop back out there and kind of do rock again and then kind of goes underground. I was talking to Steve a little bit about this. What's your take on it, and have you had any dialogue with him? Has there been any conversation? Because the world would love to see that Eat 'Em and Smile band again. I know a number of years ago you got super close to doing a couple songs in L.A. at that jam, and it was shut down because of the capacity and all of that. But do you have any dialogue with Dave at all?
No, I haven't. That's a great thing about that thing we did in L.A. We couldn't play the show because the fire department shut us down. Rightfully so. It was dangerous. They had too many people in there. But we hung in the back, myself, Dave, Steve, Greg, and our keyboard player, Brett. And I posted a couple photos of them. We're just standing in a circle talking about the old days. And that was almost worth it right there, just to sit there and hang. Because when we were in that band, we'd sit in Dave's basement and tell stories. And we had a riot. It was a great hang, a really great hang. I haven't been in touch with them lately, no. I know I'm in touch with Greg and Steve a lot. Sadly, our keyboard player, Brett, passed away not too long ago, too. So everybody stay healthy, please, man. It's tough out there.
Yeah.
But, but I would love to do it, of course. just for the sake of doing it. Even if it was one show, it'd be a blast. So whatever, if Dave gives a call, if it ever happens, I will likely drop whatever I'm doing and be happy to do it, because he's still my hero, and I still have nothing but the highest regard for him.
And I wanted to ask you about Sons of Apollo, because I know they toured recently outside of the U.S. without you. Are you still doing that band, or have you stepped away from that?
The band isn't doing much now, but when it does anything again, I'm happy to be there. I love the band. I enjoy playing with Mike, Jeff, Derek, and Bumblefoot. It's a blast. All the touring we did was just great, and we made some great inroads elsewhere. So I'm happy to. I know Mike's busy. Is he touring with John Petrucci?
Yep, he's going out with Petrucci. They start on Wednesday, actually. They were both on with me yesterday, actually.
Oh, great. It's nice to see that, because I know going back to your old friends, like that's why our phone call is happening here, going back to people you play with in the past has always been a joy, especially you let enough time go by, because bands are like a marriage, and it's going to have little blow-ups, but you let enough time go by, everything's cool, and it's great to go back with your old friends again.
So can you comment on why you didn't play with Sons of Apollo, or is it just was a scheduling thing, or just something that didn't work for you at the time, or?
No, it was
sounds like me a little bit.
It was a vaccine thing. And,
okay.
I didn't have proof, and I needed there was a situation in my family with a particular affliction, and I'd rather not get into that if you don't mind, but
sure.
I was advised to avoid this particular procedure, so I did. It's a tough decision, and I wish I could have been there with them. But it's a wild world for sure out there now.
Well, Billy, I give you a lot of credit for being honest about that, because although I am vaccinated, I completely believe that it should be everybody's prerogative on where they land on that, and everybody should make their own decisions. And there's so many artists right now that have lineups of bands that don't have certain members in them, and for whatever reason, they're not honest about that being the reason that the person that's not with them is not vaxxed or couldn't get vaxxed. I never understood why that's such a thing where people kind of like skate around it. But I appreciate your transparency about it, because I respect it. Everybody should make their own choices.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I posted when it went down. I posted some photos of me getting vaccinated in Germany before we went to India with Mr. Big. It was required to have a cholera, yellow fever, and something else. I'm not against vaccinations, but this particular one triggers a particular syndrome that does run in my family, and I was advised against it. And I played by the rules. I stayed indoors. I stayed away. I wore the mask all the time. I played by the rules as best I could, stayed away from people, and do my best to ensure the health of the people around me. But that's the way it goes, and I respect everyone's decision to do what they do. And I think now, as time is going on, we're seeing that some of the protocols that were enforced strongly weren't absolutely necessary. So I think people are lightening up on it, and I'm glad to see that. And I'm glad to see we're mostly over it for the sake of everyone's health and for the sake of everyone's mental health, too, because it's been tough.
Yeah, what kind of things did you do during the lockdown? You actually were doing, did I see that? I think you were doing online instructional courses, or actually offering your services to play on records and things like that?
Yeah, out of nowhere, people would just write to me and say, "Hey, can you play bass on so-and-so?" I learned early on, though, I got to hear it first, because sometimes I'd agree to play on something and I'd hear it and I go, "Uh-oh, got to do some fixing here."
Right.
But so I learned early on. But it was cool. So I ended up doing over 600 tracks, about 4 or 5 albums, and people all over the world in every style you could imagine, from electronic dance music to death metal to straight up rock to country to fusion to classical and jazz. And it was actually good for me, because I had to sit there and figure things out, me and my engineer in Nashville, figure how are we going to approach this piece and dig deep And it was really helpful to me in my playing, just to increase my vocabulary on what I do on the instrument by playing all these different things, and also songs that just aren't completely together, and the timing's a little off, or the drummer blew apart, and we got to figure a way to play through that to make it sound right. And it was quite an adventure itself.
Yeah, that's really very cool, and I'm sure that you made some up and coming musicians very, very happy getting a bass track on their record from Billy Sheehan.
There was this one band from Germany, I believe. I think they're called Stinger, and the guy sounds so much like early Bon Scott. It's amazing, and the tracks were very AC/DC, though not fully AC/DC. And I think their song won like some song contest in Germany or something. So they got some good results out of it. So I'm pleased with that.
And of course, final in the whole Billy Sheehan world is speaking of Portnoy, and I saw Richie a few weeks ago. He was at the tail end of wrapping up his solo tour. We finally have a third Winery Dogs record in the can, done, mixed, mastered, ready to go. And Mike was saying yesterday that the three of you guys have really carved out a lot of next year to dedicate to that fantastic trio you have. So I'm sure you're looking forward to that.
I sure am, man. We're so pleased with the record. We're over the moon about it, and the fact that we're just going to play tons of shows. I love playing with the Winery Dogs. It's three-piece, makes things very simple and easy to watch each other. I watch Richie, I watch Mike. Mike and I got great bass and drum ESP, where we think the same thing at the same time by some odd set of circumstances, and it's a blast to play in that band. And so they're booking it like crazy now. I know they've got a couple months booked already, and now they're looking at other territories, and so we're all very excited. And we have you to thank, of course, for being one of the seeds planted that created the band by suggesting Richie to Mike and I. So we never forget that, Eddie.
Well, I appreciate you guys saying that. It really means a lot, and I'm just happy that it's gone so well and that there's another wave of it coming. And I have been lucky enough to hear some of the record, and I don't think any fans of the band are going to be in any way disappointed. I mean, you really very much picked up right where you left off. To me, it feels like a lot of elements of what's on the first record, but also some of the more experimental things from time in the second record creep in a little bit. But the little bit I've heard of it sounds like it's a little more in line with the first record, and it's just killer to me. It's just I think fans are going to love it, and the material's just stellar.
Oh, I'm so glad. I always say that my three records, Eat 'Em and Smile, Mr. Big, Lean Into It, and the first Winery Dogs record. I love that record so much, and again, it's a joy to play with those guys, and we're excited to get out.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you, and I think we've talked about this before, but when you go back to Talas and the early years, and of course for people that are big Billy Sheehan fans, they know that's where you started. That's where the song Shy Boy, that of course was on Eat 'Em and Smile, came from. It's actually a Talas song. I had Sink Your Teeth into that. I mean, I had those records growing up as and again, I saw you back then. And you were so much of a focal point of that band because of the way you played bass and because of your onstage performances and all of that. What was, when you left the band and you notified them that you were going to Roth, I imagine that was a tough thing to do. And I'm wondering what the temperature of the band was like, because it felt like, to me as a fan, at that time, Talas was very much poised to maybe take the next step and really make a big national run. Was that a difficult thing for you, circling back to Talas?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was like I said before, it was bittersweet that I, chose to leave. But at the time, there was a lot of pressure, too. I mean, we were slugging it out every single night, getting into a van and driving 2 hours. After a 2-hour show, getting in the next day, staying in a Motel 6, maybe get a McDonald's, a Big Mac, if you're lucky. And then the drinking laws changed, where it went from 18 to 21. So the bar business got cut in half. So a lot of bars and clubs shut down. So a lot of gigs got lost. And I was just worried about my future. And it was a bittersweet thing to have to make that decision. And I always said, well, the only band I'd ever leave Talas for is Van Halen. And David Lee Roth, close enough.
Exactly.
And I was gone. So, But it was tough. It was tough because, like I said earlier, it's your own thing with your own friends from your own town and your own songs, and you'd like that to be the thing that takes you where you want to go. But sometimes it just isn't in the cards, and I think I made the right decision. But I'm so lucky now I can go back and revisit the friendship, first of all, and also the music that we had together.
And the last thing from me, and I'll let you go, is you mentioned earlier that Talas actually started in the early 70s. And they came on my radar being a kid from New Jersey, like early 80s. But you as a bass player, early on in your career, were you still, as people perceive you to be now, the Billy Sheehan, the way you play? I mean, were you that accomplished early on? Were you attacking the bass like you do? Were you that animated on stage in your performances? Were you like that from day one in the earliest years of Talas, or did your style and approach to performing and playing bass evolve through the 70s to what people finally saw with the Edom and Smile Band? Had it been building, or were you like that out of the gate in your earliest years with Talas?
Well, it started early. We went to see Mata Hoople, New York Dolls, and Aerosmith. I think it was 72 or 73 in Buffalo. And Overend Watts wore these high boots. And I saw him, I got to get a pair. Overend Watts, the bass player for Mata Hoople. I know you know that. So they had shops in Toronto. So we ended up getting this 6-inch heel, 4-inch platform giant boots way before Kiss. Kiss started in what year? 76?
74. 73.
74. Oh, really? So they didn't do the boots and stuff, or they weren't known until, I don't know when the first record. Anyway.
The first record came out early 74.
Oh, really? So I know I was ahead of them, so I must have been 73. No matter. The only reason I say that is anytime I post a picture of it, I say, oh, look, you're trying to be like Kiss. I go, no, they weren't there yet. So it was a pretty wild look we had. I couldn't move around much in the 6-inch heels, but we still managed to make quite a scene on the stage. And it was during the glam years, like I said, Mata Hoople, Lou Reed, David Bowie, all that stuff. So it started there a little bit, and then went on from there. And it just became kind of a natural thing. I loved to play. Hendrix was my first concert, and I saw him, and I wanted to be like him, not as a guitar player, of course, but just as a performer. And that stuck with me as being my very first concert. I saw him in '68. And so my goal was to, and I remember when Mike Varney had a little spotlight, a new talent in Guitar Player magazine, my first little blurb in a national magazine. My quote was, I'd like to be able to do a bass solo for 30 minutes, but not bore anybody. That was the key point. So I don't know if I've achieved that at all, but I'm still firing at it.
I certainly do think you've achieved it. No question about that. Well, listen, man, it's great to catch up with you as always. I'm glad we had a chance to do so, and congratulations on being on the charts with your, really some unfinished business here that you put a nice button on. My condolences about Phil. I mean, that's obviously the bittersweet aspect of this, but it's really nice. What a nice, if this is the closing statement on Talas, what a nice closing statement it is. And above and beyond anything, it really is a killer record. There's some great songs and performances on there. So congrats on that. Everybody check out the new Talas record. It's called 1985, and it is out now, and I highly recommend it. Really good stuff.
Thanks, man. Thank you, Eddie, so much for this interview and everything you do. We really appreciate it. You're the greatest, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Billy. I look forward to seeing you soon. Winery Dogs action will be here before you know it. You'll be seeing my mug out there as much as possible, and looking forward to that as well. So
me too. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you enjoy, and I'll hopefully talk to you soon, and we'll stay in touch if you need anything.
Great. Likewise. Thanks, Eddie.
All right. See you, Billy. Bye-bye.
Take care, bro. Bye-bye.
There he goes, everybody. Billy Sheehan, one of the all-time greats, no question. Nothing even needs to be said more about Billy and his history and his resume and his accomplishments, and really, in a way, reinventing the whole approach to playing bass and what he does and what he brings and what he's accomplished in his career throughout so many bands. And we touched on some of it there in that conversation. And really cool that this has happened for him with Talas. I mean, the idea of going back to your first band and doing a record in 2022 and having it be well received is really, really cool to see. So again, the record is called 1985. It's material that was written then, but newly recorded. And if you're into old school, straight up hard rock, there's nothing you won't like about it. It is out now.